When listening to you guys, it's really interesting to just try to translate what you have been saying into the reality of a culture worker. So starting with you, Anne, what am I? Maybe I'm just a digital skeptic, because I'm definitely not a digital naive. I'm constantly wearing my little gadget. I'm always very close to it. I have a very kind of emotional relationship with it. I'm touching it, I'm cleaning it, I'm talking to it. I'm worried when it doesn't ring in the morning. Is it on soundless, or can I hear it? But I'm still probably not really comfortable with it. I might be skeptic. I might be a digital skeptic, actually. Our generation, people my age, we love it. It's kind of our age that invented this thing, but still, we don't, You okay? Yeah? And some of you could nod to this? No? You're all digital natives? Wow. I'm an alien. Anyway, I think it reflects something, because I see in your presentation that we are going through transition here. We're going from being digital skeptics in becoming digital natives. So where are they now? The young people here, are you digital naives? Are you uploading everything? No? No, you're not. Are you digital natives? You're digital natives. Already. You're already digital natives. Wow. That transition took 7 years. So we have undergone a huge transition as societies in only 7 years. The digital megorium, that's what I call my smartphone, didn't exist when I was a museum director. Everything we did on the internet was basically just a copy-paste of what we already did for flyers, text printed on paper things, posters and that kind of stuff. And we just reproduced it digitally. Today, it's a completely different world. That rang a bell with me about me not really being there, able to understand what the forthcoming generations might actually be reaching out for. Andrew, when I heard you just now, I said, what am I? Where do I fit into all this? And I tried to write it down, actually, in all my notes. And I just said, well, I think I'm a hybrid. Because I'm definitely stimulated. I'm stimulation, am I not? Maybe I am. But I'm also I love being expressive, damn it. I love being there, I love to, you should go to Amsterdam and you shouldn't go to the Rijksmuseum, that kind of stuff. I can see myself in that. Did you take the test? I haven't done it yet, because I was writing notes for doing this, actually, but I will do that in the next break, and I'll come back to you on that. But I think it's interesting, because I'm also essence. I define myself as essence. If people ask me, where are you? What kind of segment do you belong to? I would always say, I'm essence. I'm obviously essence, but my behavior might actually be something else. And I have changed. I'm not who I used to be. Oddly enough, I would love to be funky and young, but I'm not. And I came back to you, Alan, because I really loved that marketing thing, that little pop-up museum thing in the harbor of New York, and I would have been completely fooled, like I think most of the New Yorkers were as well. Because I can see myself loving just the idea of the experiment. The idea of sitting on a floor and listening to soundbox and not really caring about the composer or the setup of the composer. So even there, I have changed as an individual, because 20 years ago, I would look down critically, intellectually, academics, and go, who's playing? Who's playing the violin? What's the composer? And now I would rather go for the experience and not really knowing the complete framework, the complete setup. It's more a sense. I'm going for something I expect is actually different from what I used to go to. So I have changed as a consumer. I have also changed as a producer. I'm doing things through different media. So what would you say to me and to all of these people sitting here is the main driver in the way that we actually do things in the future? That's the thing I have background. What could be the main driver for architecturing your communication strategies in your organizations in the future? That would be my key thing. What should we actually be looking for? You have already given us some framework, but to all three of you, what would you describe as the main driver?
Thank you, Niels. Do you have any comments to that?
I think you've placed yourself perfectly on the cusp overlap between essence and stimulation, which are right next to each other. And crossing that boundary is easy. What I know is you're not on the boundary between affirmation and release. Yeah. So and what's interesting about segments which I like is how messy they are. You know, there aren't 8 types of people in the world. There are more than 8 types of people in the room. And when you segment yourself, if you imagine it gave you a 3D coordinate in space, like say this room, you'd be over there and I'd be somewhere near you and you might be over there and everybody does it and the whole of Oslo does it, would fill the room with these little dots. But actually they wouldn't be evenly spread. When we look, there are 8 big clouds, which are the segments. But there's loads of us in between the clouds. And we just have to put you in the one that you're nearest. You answer the questions a bit differently, either because you answered them differently or because over the 10 years you've kind of changed a little bit. You're probably nearer the next one, but you're not going to zoom across the other side of the room. So I think it's helpful. I don't think it's not deterministic. You know, we're humans. It's a nice, messy, wrong model that is useful.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
One of the ideas that comes up when I hear you talk, and I think about your 3 characters from the future, is this terrifying idea of segmenting the public based on their ability to pay attention. And the sort of terror of the digital age is sort of the cultural sector fighting the good fight of teaching people how to pay attention for sustained periods of time, when everything else they're doing is teaching them to be distracted quickly and easily, and facilitating distraction. And sort of Magna, the ultimate distracted individual who hasn't left his house in a week because he's permanently distracted. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a moral inquiry we have as a field, is are we really teaching people to pay attention? And is that at odds inherently with technology or not? So that's, I'm curious about that. I think there are valid points of view on both sides of that.
So you just couldn't identify 100% in any of these 8 culture segments. You never said that anyone would do anyways, or maybe, but no one is 100%. You also said that we are not birth dates, we are individuals. But at the same time, you have made this segmentating 8 different culture segments that divide us into 8 different groups as culture consumers. How can actually culture institutions use this knowledge, research, and information to reach people?
Sure.
Or audience development or engagement amongst young people?
Yeah. So I think there's the audience you've got and the audience you don't yet have. For the audience you've got, it's really relatively easy, because if you've got a mailing list, a box office system, a ticketing thing, so dancers, for example, are going to tag all of the records in their tessitura box office system with culture segments. There's a very simple little tool you can use that will tell you, add the culture segment to each individual person's record. So if you then, instead of hitting the 94% of people who booked for that in the past, you can say, well, we're going to send one message to the stimulation people and a different message to the enrichment people, because we know that even they're more likely to open the email even. So as a test, with expression, if you have something in the email title, it's something like join in or be part of or help us or together or one of those words, the open rate doubles. And if you have similarly underground, pop-up, groundbreaking, whatever, stimulation will open it, more likely to open it. We gloss over the other stuff. So even that kind of basic level is that. For the audience you don't yet have, if even in something like any kind of research you do, whether you're doing a survey or whether you're talking to individuals or groups, you can recruit them by segment type very easily. So having a group of young people that are in the simulation segment and having a group of young people that are in the entertainment segment would be two very different groups. And just sitting and having a drink with them, listening to what they say, will tell you more than any marketing manual.
Okay, Andrew, we just saw the Museum of Feelings, which was a bathroom spray campaign. Yeah, it has actually little to do with art, or they didn't make it to make art. It was made to make more money, probably, for Glade. I'm pretty sure very many sits here thinking that this kind of thinking of the arts would disrespect the artistic quality thing that is really important for many institutions. We also have the other side saying that audience engagement and audience development is not contradictive to artistic quality. But how do you look at that kind of topic, or the topic artistic quality, and that the art needs to be free from all these things like strings attached? Yeah.
Oh, I think that's bullshit. Sorry.
Love it.
I think quality means something very different. And of course, arts organizations are guardians of quality, and rightly so. But I don't think the Museum of Feelings was a poor quality experience. It was probably really fun. And I think that's why people lined up for 4 hours to see it. Because it was actually a high quality experience. So the artistic quality, I mean, I've been debating with artistic directors for decades about this, and I think it's not quality. That's just a smokescreen for not wanting to deal with evolution of public tastes and retreating to what is conventional. I think it's a fun example because it illustrates actually immersive experience. I mean, I'm fascinated, for example, with public interest in lighting as an art form. And I'm fascinated, like Vivid Sydney, the festival, where they commission artists to light the outside of buildings, and people walk around, and other lighting festivals, and the all-night dance party sensation where people are all wearing white and they become a palette for light, and its public interest in lighting is huge. And so I've seen museums do immersive installations with lighting technologies that are attracting hundreds of thousands of people. Is that poor quality?
No, but sometimes art has art can be anything, but sometimes it has a bigger or another mission. Sometimes it's being provocative, critical, and something that someone really wouldn't stand 4 hours in line for, or even pay $1 for to experience. But it still is important for society. I think if I have to be the lame dude right now to take this side, I mean, cultural institutions shouldn't only think about getting the masses or the big population to their cultural attractions, should they?
Well, it depends on their mission. Some arts organizations exist to produce conventional art in conventional venues that are not challenging, and that's great. We need those organizations. But there is a special place for organizations that push boundaries and do challenge people. But we have to be very careful as marketers and researchers not to privilege the art that we think is important. You know, I'll tell you a short story. I'm so sorry if this takes time, but it illustrates my point. The most amazing moment in my career as a researcher was at doing a study of patterns of cultural participation in inland regions of California with poor people. And we were knocking on doors, interviewing people about their cultural life. And I walked into this home, a Spanish-speaking home, and there was a young girl, 14, who spoke English, and we interviewed her mother, who spoke only Spanish. And I was training survey crews, and we went into her home, and she answered every question so thoughtfully. And the last question in my protocol was, of all the art and objects in your home, which one is most meaningful to you, and why? And she thought. She said, it's the painting in my dining room. And we were seated in the living room, and I saw the dining room was around the corner. I said, may I look? I said, yes. And I got up and I looked, and here was a faded poster in a cracked plastic frame of a French impressionist. You know, it was just terrible, you know, by any standard. And she went on about how meaningful this painting was to her. And when she was down, feeling down, she would sit in front of it for beauty. And I thought, who am I to judge what is meaningful to people? You know, we have to be so careful about making value judgments. Artistic directors do that all the time. That's what they're paid to do. But as marketers and researchers, I think we have to be very careful.
Thank you. And we just saw three stories from the future we just heard. They are quite dystopic. Are you afraid for the future?
Well, I deliberately created some dystopian visions. Only it's more like a warning, like, you know, this is what could happen. It's not sort of like, you know, I'm going to scare anybody. But no, I'm actually very positive. I'm actually very positive because I see, again, I know that we have the segments and we know that people are not completely defined by which generation you're in, but I'm starting to see some very promising and very interesting signs in this youngest generation, the ones that are younger than millennials. And it's really a sifting process. You don't end up with a lot of differences that go along generational lines, but there are some kernels that typically can, you know, separate the past from the future. Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on is where I kind of want to second your conclusion is I see that a little bit in that squiggly that I talked about, that who is to say that just because you're famous from YouTube that it's, if that appeals, there's a reason it appeals. There's a reason, there's a latent need in that population that they randomly, by any sort of coincidence, appeal to. I went to VidCon this summer, which is a yearly conference in LA for YouTubers. And I would see the kids stand up in lines for 4 hours. Yeah, they would camp out to see their favorite YouTubers. These are people I have never heard about. They have no professional backgrounds. They're just, but there's something there. There's something that connects with them. And so what I'm starting to see now is that at the same time as this younger generation is defraying a lot of these ideas, these sort of the ivory tower type of ideas about what's quality and what's not, they're challenging, not only in the arts, they're challenging all over the line. It's like, what is a transportation service? It doesn't have to be a taxi, it can be an Uber. Who are in the industry of lodging and, well, it can be Airbnb. So they're completely redefining what is what. And so I think that's very interesting, and we're seeing this enormous democratization process We don't know exactly what's going to come out of it, but I think we're going to see actually very creative products, very different but very creative. So I'm kind of glad that you came after me, because one of the things that I did not have in my scenarios is that fact that we're going away from this physical object-based economy to the experiential economy, where people are buying for experiences. They're going out there, they want this. So.
We have a comment from Niels.
And just touching on what Anne's talking about, the democratization, or in your presentation you talked about we're going from producing companies or from producing persons producing content for somebody else to consume, but now we see consumers producing content for other consumers. I think the co-stuff, this collaborative, co-production, co-curation, is actually going somewhere, which is very interesting, because it influences the very democratic components on how we perceive ourselves, not only as individuals or societies, but even as arts-producing institutions. Who are we doing it for? Who are we doing it with? What does partnership actually mean? If I want to reach a specific segment, do I have the right partners? Do I kind of, distribute power sufficiently enough to give the partners an opportunity to influence the content that would attract their audience to my event? That kind of thing is actually being tested on and go, Tape Fridays, all this stuff. And I think that's interesting because it's new. And at least here in Scandinavia, I see that we are still having a kind of pipeline logic, not just in terms of how the sector is actually working, but also within the institutions. And that pipeline logic is kind of, cutting the legs of really getting on terms of what is actually going on in our own time. Do you see where I'm going? And I think that's interesting. What would be your take on what should the institutions do? What would be their immediate action to get into transition and to get on terms with development?
And on transitions, you, Andrew, were talking about actively, that the young crowd was actively shaping or changing and developing their personality. So reaching out to them maybe requires a little more attention. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you agree? Yeah?
YouTube's really interesting. And the ability of certain people on YouTube to build huge bodies of influence is mirrored, I think, in the way we would look at segmentation of young people, which is that certain segments of young people are influencing the behaviors of others. So stimulation and essence and so on are far more likely to influence affirmation and release and so on than others. So who you target is how you break in, because it's a field. So even on something like, it works with young people, but it would also work with diverse audiences. So if you look at something like Tate in London, they've been trying for years to get a non-white audience. Tried everything, haven't got it. Their new strategy is to target the expression segment in particular black communities on the grounds that they are the most culturally active already, they're the most open to Tate, and that if we build a bridge with them, they'll bring everyone else across the bridge.
As this,
So I think that it is nuance, it's detail, it's listening. In the end, whether you're using a segmentation system or some other way of thinking about it, I think what Alan said was perfect as an example. It's about us as institutions having not only respect for those individuals, but giving them the respect by listening to them really, really carefully. We have built arts marketing as a profession on machine-led, predictive, top-down, one-way push marketing. We've got this message and we're going to send it to you and you're going to react. What we need to do now is build a new model that's based on dialogue and that's based on democracy. And that's based on allowing people in to the process. All of the major trends, whether they're technology-backed or not, are all based on collective participation, whether it's festivals or anything else. They're analog. And if we don't get with that trend to become to actually operate on a human level with our audiences, we are dinosaurs.
We've been speaking about YouTubers and influencers, and you also said that so this panel is about how culture institutions can use all this knowledge to attract more audience development and engagement. You say stimulation is a good group to target against or towards because they would, as other people would say, they are often influencers as well, or influencers often art consumers for stimulation. Yeah. But concretely, how would you communicate to the stimulation group as a culture institution?
They are, well, I can answer this personally, because I'm in that group, but they are fickle and really short attention span, and we're looking for the most exciting thing we can possibly do. And so, although we may have affinities to certain institutions, we're really open. What's the most exciting thing in town this week? So it's almost like sending up a flare and attracting our attention because we want to go where the buzz is, and we want to know where the buzz is. So you have to, it's almost like you have to have everything you do almost has to be like a launch to attract their attention. It has to be like the coolest club night or the latest thing that the rave that you've just heard about or whatever. It has to be news. It has to be fresh. We aren't just going to come every Tuesday afternoon. If you tell us, however, we will tell everyone else.
In Norway, we give them macarons and good photo opportunities and cava or prosecco. Would they take money to go to an event that they are not interested in going to, but just to...
I have no idea, but I don't think it's a good idea. I think we're in the business of passion, so we need to ignite people's passion, and if you can amplify and orchestrate and channel and reflect that back, but I wouldn't want to do it any other way.
Any comments?
Yeah, well, I think what you have to do is basically to have a very holistic take on it if you're an arts institution, and to try to find groups, individuals, partners that you can actually attract, and then find out what would be their main drivers for revisiting your institution. Because the revisiting is the stone that you throw into the water, and from that you can create the rings. So it's about getting Andrew, not just the first time, but finding out what would be the main driver to get Andrew back in next time. And you just said it. You said, well, tell me, and let me be part of having it made fresh and making it fresh. Okay, that's distribution of power. To some extent, that's distribution of communicative power. We let Andrew be an ambassador, or that's such a bad word, but we let Andrew be part of our communicative strategy. And in doing so, we embrace you, and we could get you in. That could be a strategy, but then you have to have the power to execute that strategy, and that's quite difficult unless you actually understand how Andrew is navigating.
Can I just say, only one of the 8 segments is actually responsive to traditional arts marketing.
Which one is that?
And that's entertainment,
Yeah.
which is the one that ignores what we do.
Great.
Essence think that marketing is for other people because they already know. Expression don't want to be marketed to, they want to be part of it. Yeah. They want to be in the conversation. Affirmation don't believe marketing because they think it's, everyone says it's the best, so they want an independent thing. Release don't have time to look at marketing. Stimulation do like marketing, but only as a kind of art form in itself. If you do something funny or beautiful, they'll viral it. If you do something terrible, they'll viral it. Enrichment think that marketing is what's wrong with the modern world. Can't we just go back to information? You could go through this. Nobody likes marketing. No one likes marketing. Why are we doing marketing? No one likes marketing. Let's stop doing marketing.
And what's your take on
1 minute left.
What's your take on influencers?
I think it's the big elephant in the room. It really is exactly the way to go. Because again, I agree with you. Nobody wants to be marketed to. But here's an interesting thing that is happening with this new shift towards YouTube. One thing that I'm noticing, and I got this from a lot of the panels that I went to this summer. So this younger generation isn't necessarily against sponsored, paid alliances. So because they know that the YouTubers, that's their job. They're being sponsored, so they're featuring brands. It's the authenticity. That's what matters. It's not whether you were sponsored or not. Is this authentic? Or do you actually believe in this yourself? So if you have argued against something one week and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I'm featuring this, and then that's not going to work. So it's the authenticity that you can bring to it. And that's the thing about the influencers, is that they are authentic. They're organically grown up. I mean, their fame is completely organic. So there's something there. They're representing a voice that is already, that needed them. They're filling that void out in the audience. And then if you can find the one that actually is interested in the arts, but it needs to be somebody who's already interested, and then you tag along, then you can piggyback on that current interest that they have.
Personally, I'm very tired of the influencer term. I actually went to an award in Norway called Vixen Blog Awards, which is now called Vixen Influencer Award. I got so sick of it that next day I couldn't go to school, and I said to my teacher that I can't come because jeg har fått svineinfluencer. But with that, we have to close this panel. Sorry, that was a Norwegian term, but influencer is flu in Norwegian. Yeah. So I got the bird influencer or something. Okay, but thank you to Nils and Andrew and Alan, everyone.